Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Car Johnson. I am the event coordinator for Green Apple Books in San Francisco. It is my pleasure to welcome today John Finnemore to celebrate the release of The Researcher's First Murder, a Kane's Jawbone puzzle. John is joined today by Unbound publisher and co-founder John Mitchinson. I am joining you from San Francisco, California, but again, please do let us know in the chat where you are tuning in from. We love to see it. I'm very glad to be here with all of you and very glad to be celebrating this follow-up to Kane's Jawbone. Green Apple came to have a very special connection to Kane's Jawbone because of a bit of serendipity when Sarah Scannell shouted us out on TikTok as the source of her copy of Kane's Jawbone, and we were very suddenly quite inundated with orders and interest, which put us in touch with the wonderful people at Unbound. It's quite wild how much TikTok can do for a book. We have seen it firsthand. It made Kane's Jawbone a bestseller, and now as a result of that serendipity, we get to host this follow-up event, which is the only US event that John Finnemore will be doing for The Researcher's First Murder. So we are quite honored to be the hosts for this. This hour, we are going to hear a little bit from The Researcher's First Murder, and then we are going to hear a conversation between the Johns, Finnemore, and Mitchinson. We will open up for audience Q&A at the end, but please do use that Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit your questions anytime they come to you, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the hour. I'll also include a link to purchase The Researcher's First Murder from Green Apple in the chat. I will say now I see a lot of people are joining us from the UK. I would recommend getting it from a local bookstore there or from Unbound directly if you are joining us from the UK. If you've been to an event with Green Apple before, you've certainly heard me say that when you buy books from us, not only do you support us as an independent bookstore, you also support the authors and the publishers who put so much work into making these books, and then you get to have a book, which might be the best part. So if you are able, we always appreciate it. I will link that in the chat for our US attendees. Without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and introduce the two folks who are joining us today. First, John Mitchinson is a writer and publisher and co-founder of Unbound, the world's leading crowdfunding platform for books. He was previously director of research and a senior writer for the BBC TV show QI. He is co-host of the popular books podcast Backlisted and a vice president of the Hay Festival. Welcome, John.
Lovely to be here, Carl.
Thanks for being here. And last but most certainly not least, John Finnemore is a British comedy writer and actor, best known for his shows Cabin Pressure, Double Acts, and John Finnemore's Souvenir program for the BBC. He's won many awards, including the Writers Guild of Britain Outstanding Contribution to Writing Award in 2020. He also sets listener crosswords for the Times under the name Emu. He solved Kane's Jawbone as a lockdown project in 2020. He sincerely hopes it will not take a worldwide pandemic to solve this one. And his new mystery, The Researcher's First Murder, is why we are here today. Please welcome John Finnemore.
Hello, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. This is your one-stop shop for a bearded Englishman called John.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although I looking at the where people are from, there seem to be as many people from Cambridge, UK, as there are from all of America. So maybe
that's
you're
extraordinary, isn't it?
Englishman called John than I expect.
Well, it's very good to be here, and very, very good to be in Green Apple, which, as Carl has said, has a place of huge importance in the mad story of Kane's Jawbone, which has sort of been, I suppose, over the last 5 years, has been a pretty extraordinary thing to be involved in. And it's very nice to be here with John, because quite unexpectedly, the reason I got you into all of this was the fact that we'd put up this extraordinarily, I thought, interesting literary puzzle called Kane's Jawbone, expecting there to be some interest, but not quite the astonishing kind of worldwide interest that ensued. And your kind of participation, John, was very much before the viral kind of breakout of the book, wasn't it?
Yes, yes, it was. As Carl was saying, it was a lockdown project. It was, yeah, I looked at the book when I got it before the lockdown, and had a, I think I got the first edition, so it was a box of cards, just as mine is,
Yeah.
and had a flick through them and realised, no, I had no chance with this. Didn't make any headway at all, or barely any. I put the sort of three pairs of poems together, and I thought, yeah, that'll about do me. Put it on the shelf, and waited, until I retired or something and had a bit more time. To which the universe responded by locking my house and making it illegal to go anywhere or see anyone, which turns out to be an excellent way to solve it, or to
And
not.
yeah, I mean, you are an enthusiastic and keen puzzler, aren't you?
Mm.
It's something that you do. One of your many hats is you set crosswords for the not the Observer, but the Guardian. They're
That's right.
connected
Yeah.
to each
No,
other.
not the Guardian. The Times.
The Times, sorry, yes, of course.
Yeah.
Um, were you aware of Torquemada as a kind of a puzzler before you plunged into the puzzle?
Yes. I mean, as a puzzle setter, certainly he's the man who more or less invented the British style of cryptic crossword, where you're given a wordplay and a cryptic definition, and then it was refined by his successor Ximenes. And so, yeah, he's fairly famous if you set or solve crosswords. And but I'd never read anything else by him.
I mean, I wasn't aware of him until I made a fateful trip to the extraordinary place called Shandy Hall up in Coxwold in North Yorkshire, which is the house where the great 18th century novelist and parson Lawrence Sterne wrote Tristram Shandy, which I suppose is in itself a kind of one of the great puzzles of English literature. And the curator there is a man who glories in the name of Patrick Wildgust, has an extraordinary collection of books, not just puzzle books, but books that are sort of pushing the form of the novel in all sorts of different directions. And it was he that said, I think there's something that you might be able to profitably sort of revive. And showed me a thing called the Torquemada Puzzle Book, which was a 1934 kind of stocking filler for people who loved crosswords. He was a very, as John has said, very successful crossword setter and more or less invented the cryptic crossword. But this was, I think, as far as I can see, John, Kane's Jawbone, the idea of Kane's Jawbone was the most difficult, the hardest puzzle he ever set.
Well, it's certainly the biggest. It's 100 pages. Well, you know what everyone here knows what it is. I don't need to describe it. So just in terms of yeah, word count, because he had the luxury of half a book to put it in, it is big and it is extremely complex. So yes, I should think it probably is the hardest.
And I'm always intrigued, not being a kind of an inveterate puzzler myself. Was the attempt to solve it? It obviously, you say it took you months rather than weeks.
Yeah.
And it's complicated, isn't it? Because the book is full of references to 1930s popular culture that I mean, presumably quite difficult to verify.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's basically a huge pro and con. If your choice is between solving it in 1934 or 2019, or indeed 2024, the reasons why you might want to go back in time and solve it in 1933 is because you'll understand what the hell's going on with all the references to arcane licensing laws and temporarily popular tennis players, etc., etc., and slang as well, and also, and not just like 30 slang, but 30s pulp whodunit fiction slang, which he enjoys putting as much in
Because
as possible.
although nobody knew who he was during, didn't know that Torquemada was Edwin Powers Mathers. He was also a serious reviewer of crime fiction, wasn't he? So
He was. So
kind
he
of
wanted to get all of that in, and he does, and he wanted to get all in his favorite pieces of poetry. So which brings us to why you would, in fact, might want to choose to solve it in the present day, because Google. We, I don't suppose, I'm sure I wouldn't have been able to solve it if I just had a reference library like the original solvers. You Google everything as soon as you can, and that goes for mine too. Mine is very much written with Google in mind. You are expected to have the internet. I couldn't have written it without the internet, and you should use it to solve it. Having said that, I think everything. So I feel that means I feel at liberty to use obscure information as I like, but I think it is also available, or it's all available non-internet. I just don't think one person could find it all. And it's also, I've made sure that everything is findable in at least two separate sources and is likely to stay that way, So yeah, fire up the search engines is what I say to you.
So we should go back really to the kind of the genesis of the researcher's first murder. You discover that you are the first person to have solved Kane's Jawbone, and as far as we know, since Power Smith had died back in at the end of the 1930s. You obviously, there must have been a good feeling.
It was an excellent feeling. I certainly didn't expect to. I solved it. I submitted my entry just before the deadline, as I always do. Definite signature move. It was amazing. I didn't submit it after. And so I kind of only did it for completeness because I assumed that other better puzzlers would have jumped in way before. But as it happened, they didn't. So Hexagon says he doesn't know, or she doesn't know, what Kane's Jawbone is and feels dumb. Do not feel dumb. Why should you? I will quickly tell you that Kane's Jawbone, very much like Researcher's First Murder, was originally, well, it was originally half a book. And then when John republished it, it was a box of postcards with cryptic text telling a story on one side, and you had to find the right order of the cards and then understand all the illusions to make the story. And that is exactly, well, that's half of what the Researcher's First Murder is. So these are also cards with pieces of text on them. I'll read you a sample in a moment. The bit where I thought, we talked about whether I could maybe do a sequel, and I am a writer, so, well, not a sequel, but a puzzle in the same
style
format. And I am a puzzle writer, and I am a writer by profession. So I thought, well, I'm lucky in that I theoretically could do it, but I don't just want to do another one. And anyway, long story short, it was coming up with the idea. It was when I thought that they could be postcards rather than pages of a novel in my story. And so that, as well as the text side, you also have all of these cryptic pictures on this side, and it's not giving anything really away to tell you that they fall into very clearly into 10 sets of 10. So there are the 10 sets with people holding placards, and there are the 10 sets of stained glass windows with animals on, etc. Each of those 10 sets of 10 cards forms a discrete puzzle in itself. And so what made me think that that was worth doing, apart from the fun of it, was that if Kane's Jawbone has a flaw, which I do not admit, but if it does, it's that it's quite daunting at first. As I say, I always trot that story out about putting it back on the shelf at the beginning, but it's absolutely true. I did look through it, go, well, I don't know. I mean, it looks like it's going to take forever, and maybe it won't. Maybe it's not even solvable at this point. So I put it away, and I know a lot of people did that. And what I'm hoping for with mine is that if you loved Kane's Jawbone and you want to solve exactly that kind of puzzle again, well, I've written one, and you can basically not try to solve the pictures at all, and you can still enjoy the same experience you had with Kane's Jawbone. But if, and let's face it, this is going to be given to a lot of uncles and aunts at Christmas. And if Auntie Brenda picks it up and goes, well, I don't know what to do with this, but I do quite like puzzles. What are these clocks doing? I wonder what happens if you put them together. And then gets into that, I hope that they also will, get some fun out of it. I want everyone who gives this any amount of, time at all to get some enjoyment out of it. And I want almost no one to get every single scrap of enjoyment out of it, because my ideal is that there are still only about 12 entrants and only 6 people get it right. But you can have a lot of fun with it without going all the way. And as I say, you can experience the whole story and work out, oh, I should have said to the person who didn't know about Kane's Jawbone, it is also crucially a murder mystery, You
Yes.
had to not only put them into order, you also had to identify the murderers and victims in 6 murders. I have kept that format, except that it's 10 for me. So there are 10 murders, 10 murderees, and 10 locations you have to identify. And as I say, you can, I think a lot more people will get to that point than we're able to get to it with Kane's Jawbone for various reasons. I think this is probably, let's make no bones about it, very difficult, but I don't think it's as difficult as the original, partly because of the time thing. This was written in the present day, and I know you've got Google, but you know that I know that. And also because the original always ended its pages with a full
Yeah,
stop. And I can't quite, I couldn't bear to avoid the fun of breaking sentences over a page. So about half of my sentences break over a page, typically before the last word in the sentence. And that means, and there's plenty of sort of tricks and traps with that, but essentially that does narrow it down. That means there's an awful lot of cards that are very unlikely to follow other cards. That feels like a good moment to read you these 2 cards.
great.
Here is a little clue exclusively for you. I mean, statistically, it's worthless. The 2 cards I'm going to read you do not, in fact, follow one another. So there you go.
Love
Put
it.
that in your spreadsheet to start with. Here we go. I will, before I start, I will try and read it in just a neutral way, obviously, because I don't want to
Give anything away.
give anything away. So I'm just going to read it as if I've never seen it before. Brother. Though even then, all the actual work was done by May, or was it April? Oh, was my brain, if you can call it that, playing tricks on me, and I mean a March. Not Joe, I'd have remembered. I digress, and perfume has nothing to do with it. The point is, I made a decent fist of emulating the seal-handed one, but as soon as I tried to take on the mantle or ulster of the other, their brother, I proved as utter a duffer as their mucker the doctor. Sorry about this. Pull yourself together, Traff. I learned one thing anyway. It turns out that if you come frisking up to a murderer's happy hunting ground, ears up and tail wagging, and start yapping your silly little head off to everyone you meet about recent deaths, you don't find out very much. But the murderer does. So the final ignominy is that in the end, the murderer figuratively tapped me on the shoulder and introduced themselves. And if they hadn't happened to be the nicest murderer I've ever met, they would have tapped me non-figuratively on the head, and quite right too. Anyway, it was the mole. Though I'm looking at it now, and it's perhaps a stretch to call it a shabby, dingy little place. That travel advice, of course, was for those who count themselves, as I do, fellow fans of the former flatmate of the future sink magnate. I do apologise. I suppose that's better than being a fridge magnate. I do apologise. I should perhaps explain that they do these little gin and tonics in a can. Gins and tonic? Gins and tonics. Right. The captain has just informed me we've got 20 minutes to go, which ought to be just about enough to tell you the story of the murder. It's not much of a story, or much of a murder. It began, legend has it, with an argument about a comb. And no, I'm afraid both parties are quite luxuriantly hirsute. It was undeniably murder, though. The heat of the moment was set aside and left to cool. Lefty left, went to work, found themselves a knife, came back, and stabbed the old man in cold blood, the street, and the back. It must have been a hell of a comb.
So great.
That's that
I
sort
have
of
to say,
nonsense.
I have to say, one of the joys, and I'm nowhere near solving it, you'll be pleased to know, John, is I'm loving the voice. It could be more than one voice, who knows? But it's the storytelling aspect to it feels to me rather more kind of less forbidding, let's say, than Kane's Jawbone. More kind of come on in.
Yes, I think that's right, and that's kind of my message as well. I think is that obviously come on in because I want you to buy my book, but also yes, it is less austere. There are jokes in it, and there's a story in Kane's Jawbone. Absolutely, there is, but it's more atmospheric in some ways. I think I don't, and I might just be missing stuff because there's definitely still stuff I don't know about Kane's Jawbone. But my suspicion is that a lot of it is allusions to tropes of murder mysteries without being that you should, without the intention being that you should absolutely understand the whole story from first to last. I see there's some people from the comments who've either attempted or succeeded in solving it, and I don't know. I think you'll agree with me that we don't quite know what's going on. Quite why the penman is doing his work and who on whose behalf well, we know who the client is, but we don't necessarily know who the original is. The relationship between the client and the leopard, the one who's described as like a leopard, things like that. I don't know. I think we've all got theories, but I'm not certain that we were meant to have it all nailed down. With mine, there is a story. I suppose what I'm saying is Torquemada was a puzzle setter who
Yes.
wrote a puzzle in the shape of a novel. I am a storyteller, a story writer who is writing a story in the shape of a puzzle. And I think, again, that probably makes it easier to solve. But what I'm hoping is that the picture sides, which are at varying levels of difficulty, but some of them are absolute swine, will sort of balance that out. And although you might get to the end of the text side quicker, you might not, but you might. You've then still got all the work of the picture sides to do.
Yes, I see quite a few people in the chat are asking whether it's been sold yet. Well, obviously, and very kindly, they put in the deadline for entries. So we won't be announcing whether or not anybody's got it right until then. So so there's everything to play for, I think, wouldn't you say, John?
I would say that there's.
Of course,
we
you
wouldn't
would.
dream. We wouldn't dream of announcing such a thing, but I would say that there is everything to play for.
And the frame, just being absolutely clear about this, is the postcards are also there is a meta thing. It's basically a locked drawer with 100 postcards, and the solution is entirely contained in those postcards. And can you say that the way that the visual there is a link between the solution to the visual puzzles? You've got to solve both. You can't just, as it were, put the story in the right order.
That's not quite true. You don't need to solve both to, as I say, to get to enjoy the story.
No.
You do need to solve both to submit an answer,
Yeah.
and to win the prize. But you can definitely, you can kind of get to the end and know who murdered who and where, and you will have had to look at the picture sides, but you won't need to have solved any of the puzzles. And also, I don't know how a partially sighted or blind person would go about this, but if they did, because if you're having it read to you, God, how do you rearrange it? But if there is such a way, I think it could be, again, I think the text side could be enjoyed. Now, I don't want to give away too much. You did remind me of one thing I wanted to. Oh, what was it? Oh, yes. As well as so the setup is you're told in the booklet that comes with it that someone was murdered in a sealed room. Someone has been stabbed in a sealed room, and I explain blah 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 how it's sealed. And not only is there no weapon or obviously murderer in the locked room along with the corpse, but there's also, when they investigate, no motive. The dead person had no family, no known enemies, left all their money to charity. So the case is unsolved. But I say the murderer has in their possession a box of 100 picture postcards locked safely in their drawer, which, if properly arranged and understood, would explain not just that murder, but 9 others that happened in the same year. So that's the setup. But what I also like is that, and another thing that made me think, oh, okay, I know how to do my own puzzle in this style now, is that the postcards exist in the world of the story. So, which is not true of Kane's Jawbone. Kane's Jawbone is a novel, and it's written in the first person, but the narrator or narrators, just as Jane Eyre didn't, as it were, they didn't sit down to write a novel. Whereas these postcards, exactly as they appear in the box, not the box itself, that's, a commercial release, but imagine that this is an old shoebox, and inside it are these 100 postcards, front and back. This is exactly what is in the murderer's drawer, and therefore they were both written and created for a reason, by some person or persons, for some person or persons, and that's all part of what I hope is the satisfying, solution, the denouement.
Amazing. Did you ever think that your first, because in some ways this is your first novel, isn't it?
Yes, if it's a novel, it's my first novel.
If it's
If
your,
it's a
if it's your,
puzzle, it's not my first, but it's my first of anything like this.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
first thing with an ISBN number that I'm responsible for. Yes. So whatever the hell it is, in most senses, it's my first one of them.
Caroline is asking in the chat, does the original order matter? I shuffled mine up without thinking.
Oh, no,
No.
no, except in as much as it helps to talk to people. But I find that you can just describe the picture, and then you'll be able to, if you are solving it with other people, which, by the way, you're welcome to do. There's no reason why, I hope that some people will enjoy solving it together, or indeed in groups on the internet. That's absolutely fine by me. I put it out into, as far as I'm concerned, I put it out into the world now. How you solve it is up to you. So the only thing about the page order is that it's quite useful to communicate with other people. But as I say, you can either say, well, it's the one with the Mona Lisa on it, or, and I'm not trying to encourage you to buy the thing twice, but I will say that there's a Kindle version, and that keeps the original order. But the original order is not important, and I basically arrived at it by trying to make the junctions as funny as I could. So that's all.
I mean,
It's just, yeah.
I mean, again, it does feel. I mean, you're a brilliant comedy writer, but it does feel like you are courting laughter in a way that I think perhaps Powys Mathers was not with Kane's
He's
Jawbone.
quite funny.
He is
There's
quite
decent
funny.
jokes in it. There's a nice one about someone who says he likes to rise with the lark, assuming there's one going up about 12. So yeah, no, he does do jokes. But yes, I'm probably more attuned to jokes and less to the poetry of Robert Browning, which I can't stand.
You alluded earlier to which we had a rather extraordinary day last year with a group of people who had solved the puzzle, and we all gathered at Shandy Hall, and you explained to a group of people who'd already correctly solved the puzzle how you'd gone about it. And what was the thing that, for me, who has not solved the puzzle and now don't feel I can really without, because I know I got about 40 pages and then gave up, like a lot of people have done. But I know now too much about, it felt if I did solve it, I would be somehow cheating. However, one of the things that fascinated me was this idea that there were things that were not resolved in Kane's Jawbone, that you felt it could have been they would be impossible because it's just too long ago and we can't ask him, or that he was deep, created very deep red herrings that
yeah, my theory, and of course I can't know, but I am confident about it, relatively confident, is that there are two types of unknowns still. There are unknowns where I think there is something there, and either it's lost forever, or I just haven't found it yet. There's a thing about there's a soft hard sequence about a meddler and a peridot, which is too odd just to be a red herring. I'm sure there's a meaning there. It looks like Morse code, but I can make it into lots of words, but nothing that helps. So I think that's one I'd still got to get. And then I think there's stuff like the story told by the Major General in Trafalgar Square that I think is set dressing. He says in his introduction, not the one as published by John, but in the original, he says that he'll send an explanation to anyone who solves it, explaining how you should get the right answer by winnowing the wheat from the chaff, which to me says, yeah, I put in it's not exactly red herrings, but people will reminisce about, oh dear, I've said people now, I've given something away, but hey, the narrator or narrators will refer to, I think, to events of their own life, which are not to do with the puzzle, and therefore is just throwing some names at you to mess with you. So I think which I don't much do. No, I don't really do that at all. I do obviously try to play all sorts of tricks and traps, but I don't put in anything just for the fun of confusing you. No, that's not true. I put in loads of stuff for exactly that reason. I don't refer to someone like Jeanette Sheringham. I don't think Jeanette Sheringham is a reference. I think Jeanette Sheringham is just a girl that person knew, and I don't do that exactly. I've forgotten what the question was, but I think that was
I think
at least being the answer. I'm going to just answer something from Teresa,
yeah.
which she says, just to see if I've got it right, the text on each postcard is directly connected to the picture behind it. I'm afraid, Teresa, you've not got that right. That's not the case. No. So the picture and the text are not. I mean, I don't know why I said that. That was just giving something away you should have found out for yourself, isn't it? Sorry.
I have to say, one of the great I'm loving the conversations, the evolving conversations that we're having about this book, because it is quite difficult to do, isn't it? I remember when we talked about interviews and so on, thinking how are we going to do it without giving anything
Yeah.
away? But you're quite skilled now at how much you kind of reveal and how much you keep
Well, I
hidden.
hope so. I'm constantly afraid I'm going to drop a pronoun or something. And, you know, in my recap of the setup, I try to be very careful about, you know, it's always them and they, but sooner or later I'm going to slip up. So, yeah, it's a fraught business talking about it. And yeah, just now I was so eager to clarify something. It was only halfway through. I thought, oh,
Hang on.
that's not free information.
I don't need to do that.
You've got to work for that. I mean, it's not a big spoiler. It's just a little hint.
So I mean, you've
Tim
said
Shout says I tried to bribe his mum.
yes.
So my mum or Powers Mathis, maybe, or 156.
I don't know.
And did you get anywhere, Tim?
I
Yeah,
love that.
yeah, that's right. And how high did you go? Because she definitely has a price.
Yeah. I mean, going back to sort of differences, do you think, are there any other things that you think you basically, I like the way you say that you think anyone with Google ought, you know, with enough time and enough kind of application, it is a solvable puzzle. And we know that Kane's Jawbone is solvable because we know that now a goodly number of people have done it. But you're in a way much more direct about it and say, yes, this is solvable. It is hard, and there are lots of
As I say, I think he was as well in that little introduction. I think he's trying hard to say, you know, he says something like that, you know, rest assured that there is one and only one order that, you know, inevitably leads you to the. So I think he's trying hard to say, look, I know this looks weird, guys, but trust me. And actually that question of trust is, I suppose so when I was solving it, the expanded version of me putting it on the shelf is, you know, what I was really thinking was, I love a puzzle. I don't mind how hard it is. I've made, you know, the first little gimme is putting those poems together. So I think, yeah, this might well be, but it's definitely going to take hours and hours and hours of time. And can I trust that it won't be wasted time? Because, you know, he was brilliant, but it's a long time ago. There's all sorts of reasons why it might not be doable now. And it was when I got to a certain early sort of breakthrough, which he's planned, is part of his design, that you just get that sense of oh, I can trust him. I might not be able to solve this, but I know I believe that he knows what he's doing, and I believe that he has a plan that he wants me to follow. I know I'm sounding a little evangelical now, but that's what I'm trying to get across as well. I hope there are similar, different but similar things you discover that my aim is that you'll go, okay, well, we can relax whether or not we're able to do it. It is doable, and he has a plan for I'm sure there's more than one route to doing it, but there's definitely, that's good puzzle design. You need to give them, you need to have a route in mind, and you also need to give your solvers faith that they can find it. And of course, the aim of a good puzzle, even a really difficult one, is that ultimately you, the setter, should gracefully lose. You know, anyone can make an impossible puzzle. It's just, guess what I'm thinking. It's trivial. Making a really difficult puzzle that's still solvable and still fair, and when they get to the end, they go a bit like in a good murder mystery. Oh, I didn't get it, but I should have done. Or now I finally got it. I see I should have got it hours ago. Oh, and you're laughing at me because that's what the reference on page 23, to make one up, is all about. That's what you're going for. That's a little, you know, and then hopefully you're also giving, you know, little hits of dopamine all the way along.
Well, yes, I was going to say that those little bits of encouragement. And I think that's been one of the things that's been remarkable about this whole sort of Kane's Jawbone into researcher's first murder. Just how many people are really, you know, I think a lot of people start, but there is a lot more. I've been amazed by the fact that people are still submitting entries to the original puzzle, even though the kind of the it's long after any kind of deadline. And I mean, I just interested. Do you think there has been a kind of an upsurge in this generally, that people the idea, and do you, I mean, like a lot of people, maybe a lot of people did try and solve difficult puzzles during COVID, but it does seem to be on a bit of an upswing.
Maybe, although puzzles are perennially,
Yeah.
I absolutely love them. There was, Masquerade back in the 80s was in
Yes. Amazing.
Britain. It's a huge, similar sort of, it was a treasure hunt, but extremely cryptic picture book you had to solve. That was huge. A few years ago, it was GCHQ puzzle book, which I absolutely loved. Both of those.
Brilliant.
That was that was everywhere as well. Then after that, there was a whole slew of every institution in Britain releasing their own less good knockoff of it. And so a newspaper, I think it's a sort of a kind of adage of old school print journalism, that whatever you do with your paper, don't mess with the weather and don't mess with the crossword puzzle. And so long as you keep those two in the same place as they've always been, you can do what you like with the rest of the paper, but people really, really care about the puzzles. And then of course Sudoku came along, and that was a huge. So I think it's there's always an appetite for it. I don't think there's a particular surge at the moment. I think it's just for a couple of things at the moment.
And that thing you say about whether you feel you've done a good job or not, is you want it to be solved, because it would be odd. And indeed, that it was quite a challenge. The editorial kind of, as speaking as a publisher, you can't edit this book in a normal way. Saying, well, I don't like what you've done.
It was hard too, given that I don't use capital letters in it except for the letter I for personal pronoun, and no page ends with a full stop, even the ones that should. So giving that to a proof editor and saying, point out all the problems with this was.
But what you did do was work with you worked with a group of sort of testers, didn't you? With people testing.
Yes, but no one solved the whole thing that way.
No, yes, I was going to ask.
I gave certainly the picture puzzles were, I could give to test solvers, and there were ways of running things that I was nervous about through experienced setters and solvers, without giving anyone the whole thing and saying have at it. So I can't be completely confident, but I think it's safe now. I think there are a couple of I was going to say typos, but it's not typos, it's my mistakes. I found about 4 of them, and I'm sure there's a couple more I haven't found. None of them, I can tell you them if you like. I put them on I've got a newsletter on Substack. They are in the free portion of my latest Substack. So I think I'll just say that rather than boring you with them. Otherwise, if you want the misprints, go to John Finnemore at Substack. It's all right, it's free, as I say. So yes, of course, you've got something this big and so complex and so hard to edit or to proofread. I think mistakes have crept through, but nothing that will stop you solving it at all. And what consoles me also is that the kind of mistakes are, as I say, these exist in the world of the story.
I was going to say
the mistakes might have been made by the person or people who wrote those pages in the same way as I made them, and therefore they're just an unintended but just a little extra annoyance for you.
Well, that's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because I mean, there is, as I say, it's quite hard to. I'm loving the story, even though I'm obviously all over the place, because I'm, one step forward, 17 steps back. But that when you were kind of writing, was that a consideration for you, that you wanted a satisfying, that sort of creating a satisfying fictional world, because you're very clear about the setup, and as you said, the postcards are all functional within the story.
Yeah, they are. And yes, that was I mean, I'm all about story in everything I write. I'm all about plot and character, which are the same thing. And so yes, I don't think I'd have done it if I couldn't find a way of giving it a plot and putting characters in. Yeah, it's definitely characters plural, because however many narrators there are more than one character. And yes, I was um able to do that, and able to enjoy it, and able to also, the thing I most love about writing, which is why most, if not all, of my writing is in some way script, it's for
Yeah,
radio, TV, film rather than prose, is I just love doing voices. That's my favorite thing. And the so being able to get into the X number from 1 to 50 narrative voices was another thing that made it really fun, and yet doing that in the context of this oblique illusional thing. And I tried to make it's definitely influenced. I mean, the style is deliberately influenced by, or paying homage to Kane's Jawbone. The all the literary references and the hidden
yeah.
quotes, things like that are there. But I've also just felt able to expand it to to all of my terms of reference. Anything I've heard of, or anything that's in my head is fair game.
Uh,
So and
which
that can be verified online. So yeah, there's
makes it. Do think all of that makes it feel more approachable. Doesn't make it any more easy, but it does make it feel sort of approachable, because that there are references, and though I haven't solved Kane's Jawbone, I can see that there are little Kane's Jawbone kind of in jokes
oh yeah, yeah.
in the
So you
text.
absolutely don't need to have read a word of Kane's Jawbone, let alone solved it.
Yeah,
It's a standalone thing. But if you have, then there are,
little
as you call them,
rewards.
Easter eggs. There are little
Yeah.
references, which won't matter if you haven't seen them, but if you don't know what it means. But just like any Simpsons joke, is an extra thing if you have.
One of the things that we thought when we published Kane's Jawbone was that it would be untranslatable, but astonishingly, it's been a bestseller in, I think, 6 or 7 languages already, and was published with quite a lot of Kane's Jawbone was published with quite a lot of kind of intellectual heavyweight endorsement in France. And you actually you had to work with the translators.
Well, I did. This is the funny thing that John has said a few times he hasn't solved it himself, and the so the publishers, they did have the answer. They knew the names, and they knew they had the long story short, they had an answer sheet that had been sent in and after the date, but verified by Torquemada. So they knew
Yeah.
the sequence, and they knew the names, but they didn't know why. And it's not the sort of puzzle where if you just sort those pages into order, then you can read it like a novel and go, I see, it was the butler. You have to then just understand it all. And that's so when the translators, poor guys, saying, well, how do we put this into Portuguese? I had many long Zoom meetings with them. And the first one was always when I sort of just explained the basic structure, and various things I won't give away. Just there were some fairly chalky faces.
Well, it's a great testimony to you, that your kind of deep understanding, and I suppose nobody else understands Kane's Jawbone perhaps quite as deeply as you do, having thought about it as much as you, and also having gone to the I think astonishing effort of having created something that is very lots of reference in the style of, but very, very, I mean, research is very much not a 1930s murder mystery, although there are elements of that in the story, as far as I can tell. But
Yeah,
you're a fan, but you're a fan of Golden Age murder mysteries.
oh, absolutely, yeah. No, I am absolutely my sort of comfort reading of choice is a 30s Alan Moore, Dixon Carroll, any of the greats.
The great.
So yeah, so there's some fun to be had with that as well, but it's not a major thing.
If you were going to say, I mean, if you were going to encourage somebody, there are maybe a few people here who haven't, we already know, who haven't picked up Kane's Jawbone or Researcher's First Murder. what encouraging things would you say to them to say that this may sound forbidding and complicated, but in fact, I mean,
Well, I think I've said most of them already.
I think you have
Yeah,
pitch in and solve the visual puzzles, if nothing else.
well, that's right. There's definitely something you. I think if you spend a few hours on it one evening, you'll get somewhere with something. And if you don't, by the way, then it's not for you. It's not. This isn't. Yeah, it is
Yes,
more
true.
accessible than Kane's Jawbone. It is still really difficult. If you don't like puzzles, don't get
Yeah,
this.
you're in the wrong place.
Start somewhere else. I mean, I would love to convert you into puzzling, as it were, and puzzle solving, but don't start with this. Don't go full heroin. So to start with. So no, it's not for everyone, and not designed to be, but it's probably for everyone who's come to this chat. And I would like it to be for anyone who enjoys puzzles, and the fact that there are the picture puzzles as well, the 10 picture puzzles are deliberately as different from one another as it is in my power to make. So they are in different styles, they require different sort of fields of expertise. So there's some of which I don't have and had to do a hell of a lot of well, I don't want to give things away. So but the aim is, if you like puzzles at all, there'll be something somewhere that you'll enjoy about it.
I would absolutely echo that. I think I'm not, as I said before, I'm not a puzzler, but I'm really loving playing with it, and really
Good.
loving reading and doing my best at it's. I mean, I have managed to sort all 10 visual puzzles into the 10 piles, but maybe because I'm also all about story. I'm just loving the writing. The writing is sometimes it's very funny, but it's also, yeah, it's good. It's really
Well, Caroline and Emma, both at the bottom of the chat now, have both sort of said different versions of, well, Caroline says, I have no expectation I'll ever solve it, but I'm still enjoying it.
enjoying
Emma
it.
says, it's my first puzzle. Sorry, John. I mean, I kind of said that.
You got to start somewhere.
It's not for everyone, but sure, I think it is. I hope it's a nice thing to own. And I mean, the cards, the cards are a lot of fun. I hope there are jokes and just intriguing pieces of writing that, yes, it would be nice to think that if Auntie Brenda gets it for Christmas and has no intention, like Caroline, of trying to solve it, that she might still get some fun out of it. We have to go to questions, I think, John.
We do. The last thing I was going to say to you is, how do we turn it into a hit Netflix series, John? Do you think?
Yeah, I'm not certain we do.
Brilliant. Right. So are we?
Oh,
now,
sorry. Yes. Caroline and Sylvain are pointing out that people are solving this on Reddit. So
Yeah.
also, if you're not a big puzzler yourself, there is a lot of help available. And as I say, that's
Yeah.
absolutely fine by me. You can get together in your hundreds and solve it for all I care. You'll only be able to submit to the competition once, but yeah, so there is that option as well. You don't have to try to go it alone. Or you can give it to your clever sister and, ride on her coattails, and, finally it'll get you two talking again. That's all you need. You need something to talk about, guys.
Yeah. So puzzle questions. I can see that we've got quite a few. Shall we?
Is that in a separate? Oh, yes, it is.
It is in the Q&A. Shall I read them out and
Yes, go for it.
and you answer them, and unless they're for me, which is very unlikely. With regard to the researcher's first murder, is the lemon in play? I have no idea. Yeah.
It's always in play.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, that was an easy one. Tim Sham, I have my own challenge for you, John. Presumably it's you. Brains Jawbone.
Well, I look forward to that, although I'm already suspicious because I recognize Tim as being the person who allegedly tried to bribe my mum.
Your mum, yeah.
Yeah, we'll see.
Peter says, which character from Cabin Pressure would you best be able to solve Kane's Jawbone and or the researcher's first murder?
I mean, can there be any doubt about it? It is clearly Douglas. I mean, Carolyn would have a good go, but she will, well, or no, Carolyn would be good at it if she had to. But I don't think she would get in. She would lose patience with it too quickly. Douglas would pretend he hadn't opened it and then just casually annoy Martin by revealing that he's far ahead of him. And Arthur would very much enjoy the pictures of elephants.
Brilliant. For those of you who don't know, Cabin Pressure is John's brilliant BBC Radio 4 program, which is available, I think, on all kinds of
Oh
different
yes,
places.
Audible and
Audible and yeah,
CDs even if you're ancient like me.
yeah. Tim, another question from Tim, and then we'll move on. Have you heard of the Edgar Wallace book from 1904, For Just Men? It had a large prize. I must confess, I am not aware of it.
I am aware of it, and I've read it along with a lot of other Edgar Wallace, a hugely prolific early. I didn't know it was as early as 1905. That's very early. That's yeah, good for him. He wrote, I think, literally hundreds, and therefore they're not all terrific, but Poor Gentleman's a good one. He was so proud of it, or his publishers were so proud of it, that they, stopped. How did they do it? Did they actually publish it without the last chapter and then leave that? Oh no, it would have been serialized, so it would have been in magazines, and then before the final chapter, there was a prize for anyone who solved it. I don't know whether it was awarded or not.
Well, we've got some controversial questions coming up. I can see.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Tim, for that. Do you hope whoever solves this will continue the tradition, write a follow-up?
Yes, I do. I think it's my knee-jerk reaction to that, because I'd really like to solve another one, and there isn't another one to solve.
That's true.
Yes.
I mean, can you ever imagine doing another one? And this is obviously, I won't hold you to it, but
I can definitely imagine it. Yes, I'm not eager to start now, but I can imagine
it. So another question from David. If we start with the puzzle pictures, how do we know we've arrived at the right solution? Well, I don't think we can really tell you that, David, honestly.
Well, no, I mean, all I'll say in a sort of meta way, though, is I like to think that when you know, you'll know. And if you don't know yet, then you haven't got there. If there's a sort of iffy one where you think, well, I suppose that kind of works, does it? If you squint at it from the left, then, I mean, obviously this is me just saying I'm good at writing puzzles, but I think I am all right at writing puzzles, and I don't think any of the solutions are like that. I think when you get them, you go, well, that couldn't be anything else. There's no way that's a coincidence. That's the answer. So yes, hopefully they will, as you say, hold water.
Carolyn Forcus asks, in the text, is it written as 10 different authors, or all written by one person? If you can answer that.
Sadly, Caroline, I've forgotten.
That's such a good answer. Perfect. Yep. Did you draw, this is from Peter Edwards, did you draw the caricatures yourself? If so, was the art part more fun or less fun than thinking up the puzzle part?
I did draw the caricatures myself, and also the animals and a few other bits and pieces as well. And I also did all the, or most, with the help of very talented Chris Lindsay. I did most of the kind of remixing of these of the engravings, and I absolutely loved it. I had a lovely time with that. They are two of my, I don't find writing itself, the actual act of writing, my whole job, I don't find that enjoyable at all. I love being a writer, but I hate having written, like many writers. But I do like puzzle setting, and I can get lost in that and do it for hours, and I do love drawing, and I can get lost in that for hours. So both of them were a lot of fun to do.
Chris asked the question, can you tell us what the process of designing a puzzle like this looks like? I can see the cards have evolved a long way since the prototype examples you posted on your blog. How much has the puzzle changed throughout the process?
It's changed enormously. It's been a huge, as I say, I'm lucky that I find it more enjoyable than the type of writing I normally do, because it took so much more time than I thought. It's 2 years of work. Obviously, it's not the only things I did in those 2 years, but I was doing it steadily for those 2 years, and often for, it was the only thing I was doing. And of course, it's changed a lot. It's, there's a lot of complexity to it, and everything, certainly when you're trying to write it, affects everything else. So a change here has huge consequences over there. I can't tell you too much without spoilers. The cards I posted on the blog, they were sort of like an architect's drawing of what might be coming. They're not all so it hasn't evolved as much. The pictures of penguins were never really going to be in the box, put it that way. But then there are other bits that are, and if you look at the text, you'll see that a few of the chunks of text have made it into the final version.
Brilliant. Kate Deaton Gupta, are there any online references that would be especially helpful for us to bookmark?
Yes, loads.
Great answer. Emma Hawkins, when choosing the pictures for postcards, was there a reason for choosing some specific ones? We had fun looking for the white line cards, so finding the specific places sometimes is a real rush.
Yes, I've been enjoying watching people solving the finding the places. Not that I ever lurk on Reddit, but if I did, I would have enjoyed that. And uh, I can't tell you about reasons, except that, I mean, it would be odd if it was a. Anyway, I can't tell you about reasons. What I can say is that you Reddit in general. I thought I found ways of making the places pretty unimage searchable. So, firstly, I've put white lines all over it. Then I put a frosted effect over half of it, and then, and I think I'm going to tell you this because it doesn't apply to all of them, but some of them, I took the photo myself. So the fact that you can still, you still manage to Google image the hell out of it and find out where this place is, where this is literally a photo I took on my phone, is I'm both in awe of you and annoyed.
There you go. A lot of your Hexagon asked the question, a lot of your storytelling has a puzzle-like aspect to it as pieces and characters come into play. What appeals to you about puzzles? Was there anything you had to change in your process for this one?
Well, that's a good and complicated question. I do have a puzzling sort of a brain and a storytelling sort of a brain. And I think, and I mostly write comedy, and comedy is often, there is that same sense of, a punchline either to a joke or to, for instance, an episode of a sitcom or a sketch should feel like there's a similar sense of I'm withholding information and then revealing it or allowing you to discover it for yourself in just the way to get the biggest, I suppose, dopamine hit, whether from a laugh or a aha, I should have got it. So they're quite closely linked. And I know those are two things that I love to consume as well. I've always loved comedy and solving puzzles. So yeah, that's, I suppose, just aspects of the way my brain is wired.
Emma Hawkins asked, what was the favorite of the picture puzzles to put together?
Oh, I like drawing the caricatures, as I said. The engravings were really hard to do because obviously it's not my natural style, and I'm not a particular photoshopper, but I had to kind of work out how to do it. So they were quite satisfying. I'm not going to say too much about why, but I found these ancient artifact ones quite satisfying to make. And this one as well, actually, that was quite that took forever. And yeah, but the none of them were just looking through. Oh, these are fun. The ones with the black lines, because there's jokes on them. I mean, that's not a there's just I was able. The format is that these all look like real postcards that someone for some reason drawn lines over. So I can make an advert for a heptathlon, or this is a wedding photographer's sort of handout, and put little jokes on them. So I enjoyed those.
Brilliant. Sylvan says, loving this one. When's the sequel coming out? I think we've already answered that. Unless I missed Zachary King, unless I missed my mark, there are a few cabin pressure nods in Researcher's First Murder. We seem to visit a certain motor museum, ...
We do, don't we? And when we get there, we notice that one of the cars is of a certain hue.
Excellent. CS asks, how many readers have submitted solutions thus far?
John, I'll let you field that as you wish.
I think we can say that we have had solutions submitted, but I don't think we need to say how many at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. What's that on your bookshelf behind you, John?
It's books.
Kerry asked. I would say so.
Researcher's First Murder.
Yeah, go.
This is a armadillo. This is a lighthouse. I know.
I think that's Jenna Pete says, do you think American solvers have any disadvantages compared to UK solvers? That's a good, when it comes to some cultural references, good point.
Yes, mildly. I did take the decision that, I'm British and a lot of it is set in Britain. So yeah, I use my own references, but by no means a big one, and much smaller disadvantage than you would have with Kane's Jawbone, which is riddled with both kind of Britishisms, but also 30s Britishisms. So yeah, the honest answer is mildly, but it's all Googleable and not much.
It's all Googleable. Excellent. The winningly named anonymous attendee asks, Series 9 souvenir program is a bit similar in that a sequence of events is all jumbled up in order. Was there any link between Series 9 of John Finnemore's souvenir program and Researcher's First Murder?
Well, I was writing the one while I was solving the other, but if you can believe it, and yeah, I think they're massively linked, and I didn't notice. It did not occur to me that how much that had been an influence on what became Series 9 until one of the cast pointed out, well, didn't even point it out to me, sort of referred to it as if it's something, it's just an obvious truth we all know. And I went, what, do you think so? And he said, what, you mean the out of order scenes that you have to put together to get more information? Yes, I do think so, John, I do. And of course, he's absolutely right. But astonishingly, I didn't really notice.
Sylvain asks, is the cat signature on the caricatures yours, or is it part of the puzzle?
Can't remember.
Can't remember. Penny asks, do you think you would have eventually solved Kane's Jawbone if the pandemic hadn't come along and messed up stuff for us? P.S. Your drawing videos on YouTube are delightful, and I sometimes still have a little cry about Avenue 5 being cancelled.
Oh, yeah,
Well,
Avenue 5 is a great show. It's not my show, it's Armando Iannucci's
yeah.
show, but I wrote an episode for it, and I popped up playing, of all things, as a spaceship pilot on it, and I had a wonderful time, and I got to act with Hugh Laurie. I mean, my God. And then they cancelled it. Idiots. And the first part was about the pandemic. Well, yeah, okay. The truthful answer is I think I would. I don't think I'd have won the prize. What would have happened is someone else would have won the prize, and then I'd have gone, oh, so it can be done, can it? And then I would have got into it because I like puzzles, and I'd have solved it a year later. So yes and no, or no and yes.
Rebecca asks, oh, this is sweet. I still have a set of 10 picture cards from Shandy Hall. I must have gone to the day we all had. That's
yes. So I gave,
which I've never been able to solve. Am I doomed?
No, because they were that would have been a bad version of the puzzle. I wonder which one you have. Possibly the ones I've just described with the well, let's say colors and objects on. So yeah, that was part of the because it was people who'd solved Kane's Jawbone. I thought, oh, these be good people to try stuff out on. But you would have got much worse versions of the puzzles, so I wouldn't let that stop you having a shot at this one. If you solved Kane's Jawbone, I think anyone who solved or even got a long way with Kane's Jawbone will have fun with this. I think that's definite.
Great. I think this is the last of the questions that are still open. It's Ros Gregoire. I've got one more. Sorry. Do you have to be good at solving cryptic crosswords to solve this one?
No. So Torquemada, whole thing was crosswords. Surprisingly few crossword references or crossword ease in the original, and without giving away too much, I've sort of mirrored that there. Well, you all have seen there are a couple of crossword clues in it. You'll need to work out or find someone who can do crossword clues for that specific bit of the puzzle, but in general, no, it's not an important part of it at all.
Okay. Great. Caroline Hardman says, can you tell us anything about the puzzle cards, which are one of the Unbound extras? Will we similarly know we've solved them when we've solved them?
Yes, I hope so. And so this is an extra. This was a sort of
it was little. It was the people who subscribed.
So there were 4 a bespoke, well, not bespoke, but a exclusive 4-card puzzle, which is not part of obviously the main thing. And yes, in the same way, I hope you will know when you've solved it, and feel free to share what you discover.
Okay, well, our last question on here is, besides Kane's Jawbone and Researcher's First Murder, what are your other favourite puzzles, John?
Well, the puzzle I do as often as I can is the listener crossword, which I have occasionally set for, not quite as prolifically as I sometimes fear I give the impression of having done, but still I have. And that appears once a week in the London Times, and is a very difficult crossword puzzle with sort of themes and hidden messages and all sorts of fun. I love those, and have I got them here? I'm not sure I have, but the GCHQ puzzle book I mentioned is terrific, and I recommend that to anyone who likes hard puzzles, and also Only Connect. I think is some of the best puzzle setting that's going on at the moment. Really great. I particularly love the first 2. I mean, the wall is always fun, but the sequences round is just endless. How they keep coming up with sets of 3 to which there's a satisfying 4 in a sequence, I do not know, but it's great. Highly recommend that on the BBC iPlayer if you can get it.
And there's a very nice message here just saying, John from Kerry saying, just wanted to thank you for all the entertainment over the years.
Oh, thank you very much.
And I wondered, your name, your crossword setting name is Emu, isn't it? And I loved the answer you gave the last time we were on stage together about why that name is significant for
Oh yes, so
anybody who's a crossword.
So the tradition
fanatic.
with British cryptic crosswords is that you set under a pseudonym, but it's something like Torquemada or Emu. It's not a name; it's a word or something like that. I chose Emu partly because Emu is a famously useful word for crossword setters because it's short and it has an unusual arrangement of vowels and consonants. So if you're stuck for a word in a corner, you are often putting an emu in it, and so it disproportionately shows up along with a few other words like a type of window called an OG and a type of Shetland viol called a gju. It turns up a lot, so that was part of the reason, but is also one of my favorite authors is P.G. Wodehouse, and there's a quotation in one of his books in which someone looks at someone with a kind of look of understanding as if they had solved a crossword with a particularly shrewd emu in the right-hand corner. And as that corner happens to be the one where our name goes when the puzzles are published, I thought it would be fun to be a shrewd emu in the right-hand corner.
That's great. I see Tim Sham saying there are clues in the books behind John. If you take the initials of the authors, it will spell his favorite ice cream flavor.
Yeah, it took me ages. That well done, Tim.
Brilliant. Well, I think. Here, Autonomous Intent. Not a question. Just want to thank John as working on this puzzle is the most fun I've had in a very long time. Well, that's as brilliant
good.
an
I'm glad
endorsement.
that there are people here who've had a shot at it. Excellent, and that they're enjoying it. Hooray!
That's so great.
Excellent. Hi,
Zachary says, so
YouTube.
we the minions need not be so dour.
Yeah,
Yes, that's fun.
that's very good too.
The chat's been very entertaining this hour. I appreciate all of you. You're quite funny and smart. It turns out you're all puzzle solvers, so I think that makes sense. I just wanted to thank you, John Finnemore, and you, John Mitchinson, for joining us. This has been a total delight. Everyone in the chat, thank you so kindly. I just left links for you to purchase in both the US and the UK and beyond in the chat for the Researcher's First Murder. John Mitchinson, thank you so much for for publishing Kane's Jawbone, and now for publishing the Researcher's First Murder, and for bringing this puzzle. Maybe thank you, but also damn you for bringing
so much time you've wasted of everyone's time.
Puzzle attempters. That's good. I'm a puzzle attempter as well. I think the world would be nowhere if it was just full of puzzle solvers. We need brave attempters.
So thank you for that, and John Finnemore, thank you for writing it, and thank you for taking the time and for joining us today. This has been a total delight.
It has.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely to be here. Thank you.
Great.
Excellent. Thanks, folks. We'll see you next time.
See you. Bye. Bye, everyone.